Well, hello everyone. Today we are talking with Gary Hawkins. Gary Hawkins, would you like to present yourself?
Gary Hawkins. I've been doing cybersecurity for about 15 years. So before it was called cybersecurity, info security, IT security. Um, Quick recap of my CV. Feels like a job interview. Uh, got lucky with the first job in Imperial Tobacco. I did a couple of admin tasks with the IT team for about a year and a half before I landed in a full-time role in global networks and infrastructure. So that was very hands-on. Started with things like AD and Exchange, then I moved into firewalls, proxies, VPNs, basically anything on the security side of infrastructure, so anything that spanned more than one office. I was there for about 5 or 6 years. Um, from there, I moved into an insurance company, eSure, as an analyst, so I was more involved on the kind of supply management side of things, due diligence. I also got to do some fun things like digital forensics, internal fraud investigations. That was cool, kind of sneaking around the office after hours once everyone else has gone home to do a forensic disk image capture for support investigations. Um, from that point on, I kind of bounced around financial services for a couple of years. Another insurance company, Legal and General, that was more of an architect role, so helping with design, helping with technical input for applications, infrastructure for business lines. Then on to another insurance company, First Central. This was all by coincidence. There was no great master plan in my career path. I didn't set out to focus on financial security. It's just the jobs and the opportunities that happened to come up when I was looking. That was a jack of all trades type of role. They were a very small organisation. I was the only security person in the company, so I was kind of doing the design, the implementation, the oversight, the management, the reporting, and again supporting the fraud investigations. From there, I was poached into the darker side of cybersecurity, and I moved into consulting with PwC. And I hate myself a little bit for the time I spent there, and I always feel dirty when I think back to those years. But it was a very interesting time. A couple of years of really great projects. A lot of large organisations, a lot of variety. So I did pretty much everything from board awareness, security training, strategies and culture, target operating models, transformational roadmaps. Did a bit of breach response remediation, but also spent a fair bit of time doing the less exciting stuff like audit support, compliance reporting. From there to a smaller kind of startup consultancy company. I was only there for a short time before I moved into Capgemini, which is where I am now. And again, I'm still doing the jack of all trades type of thing where I suppose because I bounced around so much in the early years, I never really sat down and focused on any one area. So some people will focus all of their efforts on cloud architecture or SOC analyst or governance and compliance, data protection, whatever. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything. So it fares well, and again, I didn't really set out with a game plan in mind, but I'm in a position now where I'm thinking that if I wanted to move into something like a security manager role or a CISO role, that I'm quite well versed. There aren't many things that I haven't encountered, that I haven't experienced. So being a generalist has served me well, and it's a good position to be in. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, yeah. That's quite a life plan you've had behind you. Currently you're working as a security manager, right?
Yeah. Although to be clear, it's a security consultant. The manager is just a title. It's just a seniority thing. So you go junior consultant, senior consultant, security manager, because they have to call you something before director and VP. So yeah.
Okay, yes. So, still a consultant, but you mentioned that, you know, you had strong views about joining eventually the Big Four at some point in your past. Do you have strong opinions on consultancy in general?
Um, in an ideal world, consultancy wouldn't exist because I'm not doing anything as a consultant that I couldn't do as an employee, as a member of staff. In fact, quite often you're brought in as an external consultant, as the voice of reason, as the impartial advisor, whatever it is. And quite a lot of the time, what you're reporting on or what you're discovering, the people already in the company know all about it. They know all the secrets. They know what needs to be done. They're just not given the time. They're not given the budget. They're not given the approval or the responsibility, whatever it is, until that other person comes in from outside and says exactly the same thing, but says it in a shiny PowerPoint presentation. And then the board suddenly says, "Oh yeah, that's fantastic. That's great news. It's exactly what we want to hear." But it's what you've been hearing for the past 3 years. So yeah, ideally, consultancy wouldn't exist. You'd have internal staff who know the organisation so much better than I could ever know. Yeah, I'm working alongside people who've been in the company for 10, 20 years. Yeah, I'm never going to be able to get that level of knowledge, familiarity with companies, so they know far more than I do. I think it's just a matter of presentation. Having said that, as long as consultancy exists as a career path, I'm going to make the most of it. I'm going to exploit it because of the variety. Because you do get to do a lot of interesting things. You get to see a lot of different places, a lot of different organisations, a lot of different problems. Than you would if you were in an organisation. I think consultants, we spoke to James a couple of weeks back, and he's kind of gone freelance contractor. So he's got the utmost control over what he does, where he goes. So I'm kind of in the middle ground where I'm effectively paid as a full-time employee, but I still get the flexibility of bouncing around different contracts, different projects. And I will say that consultancy companies are, there's a massive variety between how they work, how they operate, how they behave, the culture, the kind of work they do. There's just everything is so variable. So it's not like there's an industry and there's one job or there's one role. There's a massive variety in just how they do things.
You did mention you've moved around a bit, jumping between domains, jumping between tasks, and, well, yeah, you've done a lot of things. You come off as someone that is extremely proficient when you discuss a wide variety of topics, at least here in the server, and also on LinkedIn. And, do you feel that all this movement, all this going left, right, and joining various companies in various roles, has that helped you gain a better overview of the general topic of cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, some of the companies I've worked in where people have been, I worked one company where my immediate line manager had been in the same role in the same company for 27 years, and his manager above him had been in that role for about the same time. They knew the company inside and out, but they knew almost nothing about the world of cybersecurity because all they knew was what was in front of them, and it doesn't change. So seeing a lot of different environments, through consultancy and through changing jobs before consulting, different environments, different ways of working, different priorities, different problems, different objectives. It gives you the flexibility of perspective, of being able to look at a problem from a number of different angles, or being able to have a conversation with the business on business terms, being able to have a conversation with the technical team in their language, being able to effectively act as the translator between the two parts. And yeah, I think the variety that I've had it's made me far more effective at being able to have those conversations by through necessity, having the understanding and the exposure and the awareness of the different ways people have of working, or the different priorities they have. No two companies are the same, and what's important to one will be different for the next company.
Okay, and conversely, has your experience in consulting helped you, I don't know, get better at your consulting tasks and objectives?
I think yeah. Yeah, largely through the variety of the people you're working with, I suppose, in consultancy, because you're going to be you might be on a different team for every project you're on, and a project might be 2 weeks, it might be 2 months, it might be 2 years, but almost every time you change a project or you change an account and a contract, you're working alongside different people. So you're exposed to different mentalities, different methodologies, different skills, different strengths. So it's almost like having a whole crowd of mentors that you can call on at any given time, because you'll always stay in touch with all those people you've worked on, even when you go on to the next project. So you see the strengths. Different people have different strengths, and if you find that it's not just on the technical side, but as an example, if I come up against a problem for identity and access management that goes beyond my knowledge as a generalist, I know I've got a call list of people I can tap for advice. But it's the same for if I'm having a problem with communicating with an executive, or if I'm having a problem interpreting a certain business angle, or whatever it is, or presenting in a certain way. I know that there are people who I've worked with where I've identified those strengths, and I can go to them and say, hey, how do you work with that? And again, it's just a variety of who you're exposed to and who you work with that you get through consultancy far more than if you do work directly.
Makes sense. Um, so before I continue on to the next question, because at some point I'm going to run out of questions, we do have an audience, and if anyone in the audience wants to ask a question, we will have a small AMA period afterwards. If you don't want to speak, do use the no mic channel. It's there for this usage. So back to the interview. You've obtained your MSc degree, right? Your InfoSec degree, whilst you were already working in, in the industry. You mentioned that was while you were working at a Big Four company. But did the motivation of doing a degree happen during your work, or was it for work, or was it for yourself? How did that come along?
I first went to university at 18, as most people do, but in hindsight I chose the wrong course and I didn't see it through to the end. It was kind of a hybrid between computer science and electronic engineering, and while I thrived on the computer science side of things, I just got so monumentally bored in the electronic engineering that I didn't bother, so I gave it up. Not having a degree, I don't think it held me back, but that's partly because I didn't really know what I wanted to do back then, or where I wanted to work, or anything. So yeah, it's not like I was missing opportunities, because I just didn't have a plan. Doing the degree in recent years, it was basically because it was offered, and because it felt like there was a gap on my CV where most of my peers had degrees and a catalogue of qualifications and accreditations and letters and whatever, and I had almost nothing. I think at the time I had CISP and ethical hacking. So yeah, a CV very strong on the experience side, very varied and versatile on the experience, but very low on the bits of paper. And certainly in consultancy, more than most roles, there's still a lot of gatekeeping. Even though you have the backing of a massive global organization, you still have to kind of sell yourself, or the company has to sell you to a client. And sometimes people are still in that old school mentality of, well, prove to me that you know what you say you know, prove to me that you can do these things. And they still look for a degree or qualifications, whatever it is. No matter how irrelevant it is to the job or that you're doing, it can still be a requirement. So yeah, it was kind of incentivized from PwC, and it was offered to me as a free option. I'm going to be honest, in my time at Royal Holloway, I didn't really learn a great deal. And that's not because I'd already learned everything there was to learn in the career. It's just because I think it was a really poor course. A lot of the content was 10 years out of date. A lot of the content was incredibly basic. So, yeah, I think I've made my views on degrees and qualifications well known, certainly on LinkedIn and on the server. And if anyone out there is thinking about qualifications or degrees, university study, or whatever, I would say think about what it is that you're actually hoping to achieve. If you're going down that path as a learning experience, then look very carefully at the curriculum. Is it something that you're actually going to learn? And then is it something that's actually going to be any value to you in your career? If it is just a checkbox exercise as I did it, then by all means go ahead. But yeah, I think there's been a lot of discussion about it recently, and when you are starting out in the career, it can open opportunities. You can achieve the same goal without a degree, and maybe getting into industry 3 years earlier than you otherwise would be able to might actually work in your favour. But you will also find that having a degree opens opportunities to you, things like grad schemes. A lot of the large organisations, they have grad intakes. So every year they'll take in 50 people who've just graduated from university. It doesn't even have to be a cybersecurity course, but there might be opportunities open to you there that you wouldn't have if you don't go down that path. In fact, I mentored one grad intake at PwC. There were 25 grads in the room. Not one of them had a cybersecurity degree. I think the closest we came is one had computer science and one had a mathematics degree out of 25 people. Everybody else is doing things like art history or English literature or marketing, business management, whatever it was. Utterly irrelevant to cybersecurity for the most part. They don't really care what the degree is, it's just that you have that degree. So yeah, it can open doors. So that can have value in itself.
So now that you've clearly shown some of the, I wouldn't call it, well, yes, it is a limitation. Gatekeeping is a limitation. But one of the limitations of hiring in, well, that specific industry, that facet of the industry, and, let's not kid ourselves, it does exist in a lot of other companies, not necessarily consulting, but even just to apply as a developer, sometimes you need to have 3 to 5 years of academic experience, which makes absolutely no sense. If you were hiring, let's say that someone gives you a hiring budget, and you were hiring anyone on the planet for some form of job, probably let's say in consulting or in anything else. What would you be looking for in such a person?
I think it's going to have to be, and it depends on the role. If you're like a consultant, a large part of the job is being able to interact with and present to all different types of audiences, being able to communicate on any level, whether it's technical, business, senior, junior, whatever, customer business. So communication skills is paramount there. Not necessarily competence, because that is something that grows with time and experience, but at least a willingness to be able to converse. Someone who's kind of actively withdrawn or who's not comfortable with that probably isn't going to do too well. But then that's not a skill set that you need in, say, a SOC analyst, where there's minimal customer interaction, or any customer interaction tends to be through a more formulaic channel or templated channel. So I would say it depends on the role. I almost certainly wouldn't use any kind of qualification at the entry level. I wouldn't use any qualification or degrees or certificates or accreditation as a checklist. That's something that tends to be driven by the HR, the recruitment team, as a means of first filter. I wouldn't really care. If someone thinks that if someone has an interest in the job, then give them a chance. At least give them a chance to prove themselves.
So yeah, that's quite valuable in terms of what is going on in the industry now. You've ping ponged a lot around, and do you think that with purely, let's say, technical qualifications as well as human qualifications, you speaking to me here kind of attests to the fact that you can speak to people, I think. Do you think that with just these qualifications, no bachelor's, no nothing, no masters, you would still be able to to be able to find a job at, let's say, even at senior level? Is there a pipeline for people that are technically competent to enter at a higher level?
Yeah, definitely, and I think the more senior you get through experience, then the less important qualifications become. And yeah, testament to that is when I was approached for the job, a PwC recruiter approached me, and as I was going through the process, a recruiter for Ernest Young also approached me. Now, obviously, at the time, I didn't have a degree, so I went through the first kind of couple of conversations with the EY recruiter, right up until the point where they realised I don't have a degree. I remember the conversation. He was going through my CV and says, you don't seem to have details here of your degree. They just assumed that I had one. And as soon as I said no, they literally just hung up the phone. They would not talk to me. The 10 years of experience to them was completely irrelevant. If you didn't have that bit of paper. Now, the degree could have been in anything. They didn't care. I think they have since removed the requirement for senior hires. And I think PwC at the time had only recently removed that as a requirement. So it is becoming more common that certainly in senior positions, people will assess you based on your experience and your merits more than what a bit of paper says you can recite from a textbook. So yeah, I think qualifications and bits of paper, they're probably more relevant for people in the early years. At the moment, despite my views on them, they are still used as a gatekeeping tool. They are still used as that first filter of, do you have any knowledge in this field kind of thing. So, rightly or wrongly, it's the best we've got right now.
Yeah, that's slightly depressing for all the new people in the industry coming in.
Sorry about
that. So a lot of people have been gaining experience through alternate ways, and a specific thing that's often comes back in during recruitment drive and resume review is put all your volunteer experience on the CV, right? Like, oh yeah, you helped out at this event or at this event. Well, not all your volunteer experience, related volunteer experience. But yeah, you staffed at I don't know a DEF CON village or whatever. Put it on your CV. Does that actually track? Do you think that tracks?
I don't know. I don't know who is saying these things. I'm sure they must have a reason for saying that. I think it helps to show or to demonstrate you as a rounded person, as someone who actually cares about other people. If you can demonstrate that you're doing something that's not for profit, that's not for personal gain, then that kind of speaks to your character. I don't know if that's the reason that people are coming out, or people are suggesting you list your voluntary experience, but if I saw voluntary experience on a CV, then it would make me think, oh, actually, this person has a heart. This person isn't just a mindless drone who's just hammering their way through a hack the box to get a claimed 1%er. I would, if you are going to go down that path, then I would say, any voluntary experience is relevant if it's a demonstration of character. But on the flip side, I hate writing CVs. I hate kind of self-promotion. When you get to the annual performance review stage, I absolutely detest that kind of process, because there's nothing that grinds more for me than look at me, look at how shiny I am, look at all the wonderful things I've done. I just despise that whole approach. So there is part of me that kind of thinks, if you're doing voluntary, if you're shouting about if you're doing voluntary work to have something to shout about, then you're doing it for the wrong reasons. I do a lot of stuff in the background just because I want to help, just because I see that there's an opportunity where I can do some good. I'm not going to put that on my CV because frankly I don't give a toss. That's not why I'm doing it. If someone asks me, what have you done, then fine, I'll have a conversation. So I think for me, it's just not something that I'm keen on. So if it's not on a CV, I wouldn't necessarily judge a person negatively for it, because I wouldn't put it on a CV. So I can only assume that maybe they've done a lot of great things and just don't want to shout about it. It's a rock and a hard place, that one.
One interesting thing about such events, be workshops, etc., is the ability to network. You yourself are, let's say, somewhat arduous user of professional networks. You do post semi-regularly on LinkedIn.
That's just because I've got nothing else to do with my time. I should
become a security manager.
Oh shit, this is recorded. Can we scratch that bit? Nah, I just...
So one of the important things is, one of the things that comes out is that a lot of people are invested in these types of events, and it's also an opportunity to network, be it corporate or be corporate events, or be it DEF CON or other places. How important do you think networking has been to your career and is to the general public of cybersecurity?
I would say in my career it hasn't been important at all because I detest networking. I detest, well, most social interactions actually. It's a real chore for me, and I'm definitely on the introverted side of the spectrum. So it's not something that I've done a great deal of, certainly not in the early years. So it's not something that I've exploited. I haven't, my opportunities haven't come about because of who I know. Um, but I know that a lot of people are really keen and really push the whole networking vibe, and yeah, if it works for you, then you can meet a lot of great people, and you can find opportunities through that way, and it does happen. Um, Personally, it's just not something that I exploit because it just makes me feel incredibly uncomfortable. Partly talking about myself, or not so much now, but certainly in my younger years, I didn't really care to go into all the personal details. How was your weekend? What have you been up to? Do you have any holiday plans? I don't care. I'm here to do a job. I have a question for you. I need an answer, and then I can move on to the next thing. And in fact, I was actually picked up a couple of times for being described as abrupt and brash because my emails were short, they were concise, they were to the point. I asked a question, that was the end of it. And I was the same in meetings where I was there to do a job. So yeah, the whole networking thing hasn't really worked for me. But I suppose it depends on the person. There are other ways to go about it. If you can establish a reputation through your competency and your merits, then that kind of speaks for itself, and you can become known for what you can do rather than who you know, and that works just as well. So yeah, I think there's no right or wrong approach on it. It's if it works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, don't feel like you're missing out. It's not the only way to get a job.
I'm sorry to do this to you, but we've had an anonymous question, and it is still about networking. Um, so I'll just go on and ask. There's a lot of advice to try and find roles by networking, asking for advice, and approaching directly. Do you have any experience of either doing that yourself or being on the other side of it? So I assume doing that yourself, maybe not. And if so, how does it compare to the standard apply through the website approach?
Yeah, you're right. It's not something I have a great deal of experience with doing myself. Yes, I have been on the receiving end of it. Certainly recently. So because of some of the volunteering stuff that I do, with conversations like this where I end up speaking to a lot of people who are looking to break into the industry, and they'll come to me with a question, or recently I've had a few approach me looking if they could kind of shortcut the application process, or if I could put their CV at the top of the pile, or if the job was in my team, then can I make sure that they get to the first stage kind of stuff. And unfortunately, in most large corporates, it just doesn't work like that. There is a predefined path that you go through for the application. There are a series of checkpoints and filters, and they are completely beyond the control of whoever the hiring manager might be. In some of the smaller organizations where they're perhaps a little more flexible, it doesn't necessarily work like that. Actually, in fact, I will come clean, and late last year, a former colleague approached me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, quite frankly, we're looking to expand, and I think you'd be a good fit. Do you want to have a chat?" So I suppose, yes, technically that was networking, but that wasn't because it was through a contact of someone I knew. But it wasn't that I sought out that connection. It was just simply through who I happened to work with and the position they happened to be in. So yeah, I have been on the receiving end, and while I will do what I can to help someone and coach someone, it quite often it just isn't how things work. You can't shortcut the process like that in a lot of organizations.
Okay. So I shouldn't send you my CV, is what you're saying. Just kidding. For the moment. Right. So I guess we're going to open it up for questions, additional questions from the audience. Do use the No Mic channel if you do have any, or speak up. We are recording.
Come on, I know
Yes.
James has some questions. I put him on the spot last week, the week before. Payback.
So, so real quick, I am kind of introverted, and I'm just wondering, like, do you have any tips you could give on how to be better at communicating?
Um, yes, because it's a conversation I've had to have with myself several times, and it's a conversation I've had with some other people. Um, Try to put yourself out there slowly. Try to increase what you're comfortable with. Um, but I suppose more importantly, hello, you still there? Okay, sorry. Out. Okay, bad time. Um, Realize that part of the challenge of being an introverted is you can be very focused on overthinking how people perceive you or what people think of you, and you kind of need to realize that other people probably aren't thinking about you. Yeah, it's just human nature. But if you can get yourself to the point where you realize that people aren't actually paying that much attention to you, people aren't focusing on your every move, every word you say, and people aren't over analyzing how you come across, then it can become far more comfortable. It's far easier or far more relaxing to have a conversation when you don't have that that feeling of scrutiny, because that feeling of scrutiny is something that we put upon ourselves. Um, if whatever it takes to make yourself feel more comfortable and confident, yeah, just work on that. And it took me a while to kind of realize, certainly speaking to senior managers, to directors, to executive, non-execs, whatever, chief execs, and whatever else, is realize that they are just people. Yeah, they may have a big fancy title and a shiny watch and an expensive car, but they are just people, and you will almost certainly know things that they don't know. Yeah, and if they are speaking to you, it's probably because they need something, or they want something, or they think that they can help you or you can help them. Yeah, but if you just kind of try to approach them, don't be blasé, don't be aloof about it, but try to approach them as an equal. Don't put them on a pedestal and worry and panic about what you're going to say, you're going to offend them or whatever. And you'll find the conversation just flows more, far easier, far more naturally. And then it does just come with practice, I guess.
Thanks. I'll make sure to keep that in mind.
Okay. Well, that was a fantastic question. Um, so James, I see you unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
Uh-oh.
Yep. So if you're working at one of the larger consultancies, whether it's Big Four or the next 12 or so, how important is learning to play golf?
I've never played. Um, I suppose, yeah, it certainly in the Big Four and in a lot of the other large organisations, it is a matter of fitting in. And while they will always make a noise about diversity, and they'll always find someone with facial tattoos to put on their front cover when they're talking about inclusion, if you look like the person above you, or the person above you, you're going to move up far more quickly. There is still a lot of kind of old school mentality, a lot of cliques, a lot of fitting in. Um, yeah, it didn't work for me. I'll be honest. When I started there, I had a big chip on my shoulder because almost everybody else was kind of private school, fancy degrees, whatever else, double barrel hyphenated names. And I felt for a long time like I didn't fit in. And this is what I was just saying to Horseface, is I was having a hard time. I realised that I'm actually there because of what I know, because of what I've done, because of my experience, and that they are speaking to me because they value my input. Then it became a lot easier. Even when I left, I still felt like I didn't fit in, and it just becomes easier to manage. And once you can kind of identify those feelings or where those feelings are coming from, then it becomes easier to kind of live with. But yeah, no, the only golf I've played is Pirate Adventure Golf with my 5-year-old, and I don't think that features heavily in the boardroom. And I'm okay with that.
Awesome. Right. Well, if anyone else has a question, it is now, or yeah, or keep your peace, I guess. Didn't want to make it sound like a marriage ceremony, but here we are.
Wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
That's a whole other conversation.
Right. Well, I have one final question for you, and I think you tied into it quite nicely with the previous response about kind of imposter syndrome. So I'll give you a bit of context to this question, right? Because it popped up in my head during a meeting today, where so you join some established hypothetical project, 3 or 4 years old, right? And people are discussing for whatever, and are doing let's say less than recommended security practices knowingly. This is my context. Okay, getting over that impulsion that drives you to just shut up and like let the people talk their probably very badly thought out ideas, versus speaking up about it when you're kind of new and green in an organization. Like, have you had to deal with this form of imposter syndrome?
All the time, yeah, absolutely. It never goes away. You will always feel like there is someone else in the room who knows something that you don't. And I guess the only solution to imposter syndrome is learning to live with it and realize, accepting that, yeah, they probably do know something you don't. In which case, it's okay to ask them a question. And on the flip side, you probably know a lot of stuff they don't. And I think being the new bot on the team, or being the new person in the organization, whatever it is, you've got a couple of weeks there where you can really rinse that for all it's worth, and you can ask the stupid questions. And sometimes, even if you know the answer, even if you look at a situation like that and think you categorically should not be doing that, ask them a question like, "Oh, why are you doing that? Because that doesn't look like best practice," and that'll give you a whole bunch of insight. It'll tell you the people who know what they're doing, the ones who come forward and say, "Yeah, you're right. We shouldn't be doing that. We should be doing this, but this is the reason why." And they're the ones that you can buddy up with. You know that they know their shit, and you know that they're going to be honest with you. And then you'll also identify the ones who are just the yes men who don't necessarily know what good should look like, and they just go along with it because that's how they've been told to do it. So really make the most of being the new person on the team, and don't be afraid to ask the stupid questions. And sometimes put in someone on the spot. Even if someone's responsible or for the bad decision, making them justify that bad decision or making them explain that bad decision can be a really good exercise, because it kind of reinforces to them that they shouldn't be doing it. They know they shouldn't be doing it, and now they've had to explain why they were doing something they know they shouldn't. It doesn't matter if you're the junior analyst talking to the CISO. Putting them on the spot and making them justify why they've made a bad decision can be really cathartic, and make the most of it. Don't be afraid of asking a question, even if it seems obvious. And just go for it. And if you think something looks bad, then say that looks bad. There's probably a reason for it. It might not be a good reason, but in the very least, knowing what that reason is will at least put your mind at rest that you were right. It looks bad. It shouldn't be that way, and this is why. Whatever the reason is, they've always done it that way. They didn't have the budget, or the business prioritized something else over fixing the problem. So go ahead and ask the stupid question while you can.
Awesome. Yeah, and I mean, in following, and this is, I promise, my last question before we round it off. In your experience doing consulting work, how often have you seen a prototype or a pilot project being used hopefully in production? Like, this thing
I would say it's about 50-50. You get something in as a proof of concept, and the proof of concept expires and it is now live, and all those promises they made to you as to, don't worry, this is just proof of concept, we'll turn it off, they're thrown out the window, it's live now, that's it, job done, move on to the next one. Or the proof of concept just fails catastrophically and is put back in the box and sent back. There's very rarely any kind of in between. I would say maybe 1 in 20 times, the proof of concept will actually be packaged up or unplugged and rebuilt from the ground from start properly. But I would say it's probably close to 50-50 as to whether that proof of concept or that prototype or whatever, it just rolls into production, rolls into live use. And all those things that you flagged up as being, this will need to be fixed in production, it's just put on a risk register and then forgotten about. That's all too common.
Well, that doesn't reassure me, but I guess we'll have to live with it.
Well, it keeps us employed.
Oh yeah, definitely.
These are all hypothetical situations, of course, and not based in real life at all. Yeah.
No, not at all.
So one thing I will say to anyone listening, anyone in a junior position, is it can be fine. Well, there are some situations where you simply can't talk about anything, but those situations will be made painfully apparent to you. It's generally fine to talk about where you've worked, what you've done, and separately, it's generally fine to talk about things you've seen. Just try to avoid talking about them both in the same conversation. Because if you start talking about the bad things you've seen in client X, that's when you get into real trouble. That's when you start, giving away secrets. Always be mindful about what you're talking about, who you're talking with, what else you've said. I'm quite happy to talk about what clients I've worked with, and I'm quite happy to talk about some of the shit I've seen in separate conversations. And that's one of the benefits of having moved around so much is, I've worked with 30 or 40 companies. You'll never know who I'm talking about in any given moment. When I say this was bad. So, just a bit of general advice in when you do start talking about experiences. Well, I hope it's been useful to you. I'm normally around the server during the week, so any questions on anything, I'm happy to help where I can.
Yeah.
See ya. Awesome talk, though.
Cool. Good night, all. Enjoy your weekend.
Well, thank you very much for joining and for this enlightening conversation.